Hi everyone, welcome to The Grind. Today we'll be talking about our favorite subject, suffering. I guess for those of you who are just joining us, we are going through the study of the book of Mark, and one of the things that does pop up a lot is basically the death of Jesus and also how suffering does come with following Christ. And today we're going to talk a little bit more about navigating suffering. Like this past weekend, John was talking about Jesus as a suffering servant, and basically he unpacked how do we handle suffering. So before we start off, actually not before we start, as we start off this conversation, what kind of suffering are you most afraid of?
There's this series I like to watch called Ted Lasso. And they had a really good moment I really like. And it's about a football team and they just lost the game. Mm-hmm. And the coach was trying to say something inspiring. And he goes, there's something worse than losing.
What?
It's being alone and losing or something like that.
Oh.
Right. So I think that for me as an extrovert, that's my suffering, is being alone.
And losing?
And on top of that, suffering and alone.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah, for me it's physical dismemberment and then all kinds of physical hurt, but also like emotional or psychological abuse.
Oh wow.
So especially when people wrongly accuse you or falsely accuse you. Yeah. Or you have to hide behind like several layers of mask the whole time.
So emotional damage, psychological damage,
physical damage. So John broke down, he had 4 main points, and basically he talked about suffering and sovereignty, suffering and submission, suffering and supplication, and suffering and sureness. All right, so we're going to take a look at suffering and sovereignty and how that involves trusting God. So have you ever struggled to trust God in a season of pain or confusion? Like what helped you to endure?
I think recently I was asked, like, do I still carry regret?
Oh,
and
what a
actually
question.
And and as I think about it, I think I don't, right? But I'm not immune to it. I still cringe at it, right? But then I think
the cringe at the regret?
I still cringe at that. Like the feeling of regret.
Okay.
I still cringe at it, but then I don't let it. I don't still like let it pull me down.
Okay.
And so. Yeah, I think the way I like to see it is like, with movies, there's character development, right? How they always say that, like, oh, who you are today is because of all the mistakes that's happened in the past, right? And so all those like time travel things, like if you could change it, would you? And then some people were like, actually no, because if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be who I am today. So yeah, I think for me, that's how I kind of like endure it, is just like to know that God's really just like, even though I don't, as cringy these moments are, that it is growing me in some extent. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a dichotomy for me. Sometimes when I don't feel struggling, it's most likely because I'm not really trusting God. I'm just living my own way.
Oh yeah.
And then, ironically, when I am like having a stronger relationship with God, and then I struggle. It's there's the Alpha poster on our church wall.
Is there more to life?
It asks, is there more to life? What's the purpose? And then I do know the answer, but it's like, so what? Yeah, it's like, okay, I know the real purpose. I know how the world is gonna turn out, but then so what? Like what about now? Might be the question. And if you say what helped me endure, I guess honestly is food, comfort food, and video games, and just lying flat. Yeah, if honestly, because God is in control, but then I feel like it doesn't really matter what I do. Something like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, God is sovereign, and yes, you can trust that He's good and He cares for us, but I have definitely 100% struggled to trust God when I'm confused and when I'm in pain, because I'm just like, what's the point of this pain? Why do I have to go through this? And I like to quote Ian, this Lord's servant is precious. And sometimes your skin isn't very thick. And yeah, so I think definitely if I go down the route of like questioning God and wanting answers for every single thing that happened, I don't think I will get very far. And I think, in fact, I'll get very far from my faith and from God. And I think in those seasons, usually what helps me endure, besides the whole, yes, lying flat and maybe venting with certain friends, but I think that's one thing that does help me endure is worship, is to actually verbalize the characteristics of God, to write down my prayers, to journal to the Lord, to just be like, Lord Jesus, you know. And in this day and age, asking ChatGPT for help.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just like, what do you think about this? And yeah, I think it's just, I think that's helped me endure is really actually just worship and just calling upon the name of the Lord. And I think one thing, if there's anything that God's been really teaching me, is just his sovereignty, that he knows what's going on, and to really just trust in his ways, to lean not on my own understanding, to really guard my heart, because out of the overflow of like, you know, my heart comes like, you know, the words I speak, right? So it's a lot of like, you know, just stay focused on who God is. So yeah, basically trusting in his plan for me, right? But and speaking of like God's plan, right? So as Christians, we often hear people say, God willing, we will. All right, so we're gonna take a look at Mark 14:36. Let me just pull that out. And he said, Abba, Father, all things are possible for you. Remove this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will. So what does yielding to God's will mean in our daily lives?
Yeah, to me, it's the same old things. So like, it definitely feel natural to curse, rebel, avenge, lust after desires, and like just want my life to revolve around me and my plans.
Yeah.
And but then because of Jesus, I took on my own cross, and then I put all these down and just prioritize him first. I'm reminded of James chapter 4, verse 13 to 15. It says, "Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that."
I think that, you know, when we really become a Christian and offer ourselves as living sacrifices to God, you are already saying, I am submitting myself under your will, right? It's like how we say in our benediction, right? That heaven come, your will be done, right? So personally, I think that I will do what I believe is best or what I want and what's best for me. But the moment God comes in and says like, hey, I think you should do this, then immediately I just disregard what I want, right? But then in the gaps in between where I don't feel God's giving me any direction, yeah, I'll take the wheel. But eventually, yes, I'll hand off the wheel to Jesus occasionally.
Okay.
when he shows up.
Occasionally.
Yeah, so
Yes.
when he asks you to go to Nineveh, you'll go. When you ask you to sacrifice your only son, you'll go.
I will scream, internally scream. But yes.
Like when I hear people say God willing, we will, I think there are people who are really admirable. It's like, yes, you know, whatever, they're like, you can see that they're really submitting to the Lord and surrendering to his will, his sovereignty. But then there are also some people, I would say, that use it as an excuse to not do anything. It's like, oh, if only God wills, then I will do it, you know? Like, it just use it as just like a Hail Mary, like what if, you know, if God wills and then this happens. And then they don't really take responsibility for their actions. So I feel like then using God's will is just like, you know, just casual sayings. But I would say like one of the dangerous things that you can pray is not my will, but your will be done. Because if you're truly allowing God to do what he wants in your life and you're like, okay, there's no inhibitions, I'm just all for it. Oh, you never know where God's gonna to take you. So it's like, are you willing to actually really say your will, not mine? Because then life could really look different. And yeah, like I mentioned, right, when I told God like, I want to do whatever I can for you while I'm still young, God was like,
Yeah.
And so my life has taken quite the turn, or has evolved in a way which I never imagined it going, but you know, here we are. So, but at the end of the day, it's like, hey, you know what? I'm going to trust that you know what's better. Like, even though like I feel like this path is the best way for me to take, but I'm going to, oh Lord, take me somewhere down the path that I don't know if I want to go down that path, but sure. So it's a lot of like laying down your rights, laying down like what you know best, and moving on and submitting to his will. And speaking of submission, that's the next one that we're going to talk about, suffering and submission, which is enduring with humility and forgiveness. So we're going to take a look at Mark 12 verses 30 to 31. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. The second is this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. So what does this teach us about how we should relate to others, especially those who have wronged us?
Yeah, I'm really bouncing it off the also the other verse that we love because he first loved us.
Yeah.
So I think in the same manner that we forgive just as he forgave us. And it just so happens coincidentally, I was doing a Bible study with a few others where we were talking about the parable about, you know, there was a servant who owed his master money, and then the master said, okay, no, you don't have to do it. But then the servant had his own servant who owed him money, but then the servant was like, started choking, like, no, you're gonna suffer, you're gonna go to prison. You know, I think, and I'm reminded about that. And so, yeah, I think, yeah, in all we do, we want to just give God glory. And so I think one of those ways is just forgiving as he forgave us. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly what you said. And actually, how about we share when we hear the phrase loving ourselves, like what comes to mind?
What comes to mind when we say loving ourselves?
Yeah.
Just spending money on myself, you know, eating good. No, that's a good
That
question.
can be true too.
Yeah, that is good. You know, this body needs maintenance too. I think the first thing that comes to my mind is actually looking in the mirror and actually liking what I see. And yeah, loving myself begins with that. Is like, can I live with the person that I am looking at in the mirror? And I think self-love has, I mean, I know self-care is a huge thing these days and whatever, but I think there's a balance of like, you know, loving yourself, but then also like, you know, loving too much of yourself, right? And I think if anything, COVID has taught me to appreciate my own company too, just because I have always like spent it with, like, you know, I've always been around people, roommates, you know, family, whatever, but COVID is when I was just truly alone, right? And so Patrina, like I said, learning how to hang out with Patrina was a whole new dynamic because that was weird for me because I never did that. I never took myself out on dates and never, you know, did all of that. So, but then also it's so important that if you don't love yourself well, or at least like, you know, don't see yourself in the eyes of God, then how are you going to extend that same love to people around you as well?
I think I'm kind of one of those people that kind of falls under this the how do you say, the stereotype of where, you know, like if I'm helping a friend, I was like, oh, I want to be there for you, I want to support you, like just share with me and I'll be a great listener. But if I'm the one who needs help, I'm like, I'm fine, guys. Just shove it, throw it under the carpet. I'm fine. I'm fine.
Yeah, no, really, you're not fine. The whole fire and everything is fine. Everything is fine.
Yes.
I know, like, there have been also moments where, like when it comes to, like, forgiveness and everything, yeah, I mean, we have that concept of how, like, sometimes the person that's the hardest to forgive is yourself. And so, and sometimes I don't extend that grace to myself. I can be all, like, forgiving to the people around me, but then for myself, I'll be like, why you mess up so bad, Patrina, and just, like, hating on myself.
And then sometimes you're so easy to forgive yourself 7 times.
And then the other's like, nah, you know. So, oh man, like I would say, like there have been definitely times I want to choose revenge over grace. I feel like that would bring me so much satisfaction, but it's like, grace to you, be free, my friend. But anyways, it's again, you just have to sometimes endure humility. I mean, Jesus had every right to, you know, hate on the people that crucified him, but yet he was like, forgive them for they know not what they do. So I adapt the same. Forgive them for they know not what they do, except they actually do. But you know, You get the gist, God. Actually, no, it's just within.
Yeah.
Heal. What was that phrase that I heard? Is that unforgiveness is like drinking poison and hoping to see the other person. Yeah. So basically, let it go. In the wise words of Elsa, Queen of Arendelle. All right, we're going to talk about suffering and supplication, which is finding strength in prayer and community. So, why do you think that Jesus, who knew God's will perfectly, still chose to pray in the garden?
I think it shows it is a two-way conversation, a two-way relationship between them. So I have another lesson that is a little bit off topic, but it's about communication. So when people ask you a request, it's wise not to directly say yes or no. Actually, you explain your thought process to them, and then they will say yes or no for you. So, but in a slightly connected way, I guess, like Jesus knows God's will, but then he's also communicating with him, and I find that relationship very strong. Yeah.
Interesting. I think for me, I also wanted to see it from another angle that, this is one of the ways that it shows that Jesus is actually man, that he experiences anguish just like all of us, And I'm sure that if he wanted to opt out, he could have easily just done so. Yeah. But then no, he powered through and just committed to God's will. Yeah.
He's like, tap out, come on.
Yeah.
I like the fact that because he only came to do what the Father told him to do, so you can clearly see that was a relationship. And the Lord's Prayer starts off with our Father, right? And so it's basically he knew that relationship between him and God the Father, basically submitting to his will, submitting to what he wants. He knew the grand scheme of things was basically he needed to take the sins of man upon himself in order for it to be, in order for reconciliation to happen. He also knows that down the road that men are also going to be not the best people and also like turn their backs on God. So he knows that there is a chance that all this could be for naught. But he still did it because of his commitment to what the Father wants, and also that's just his heart for us. And I just think that it's just relationship. Prayer is not meant to be a ritual. It's not meant to be something that you just have to do, but it's really relational. It's a two-way, communication to the Lord, right? And so Jesus in the garden was suffering, and I mean, prayer for him was a constant thing. It wasn't because he was like suffering that he went to the Lord. It's just, I think probably like the final pep talk, like, Lord, let it go, bear some sins upon my shoulders. Gotta give me some encouraging word, But yeah, I mean, imagine like maybe that was a pep talk going on. It's like he'll be over soon, 3 days. But
I am the foundation.
Yeah, it's okay. Don't worry about it. Just know that you'll be seated on the right hand when all this is. All this, right? You never know, right? So, but what role does prayer play in helping you deal with suffering or anxiety? Like, do you find yourself when you turn to prayer more in a crisis, or is it a regular rhythm? That's one thing John talked about. It's like sometimes we tend to pray only when there's crisis.
I think, like what we've been discussing, it's just having communication with someone, because like, especially for me, I feel I'm a verbal processor that sometimes I just need someone to just talk it through, and they don't have to say anything, but just from me talking already gives me a whole new perspective sometimes. And so there's this teacher who in one of his sermons, he gave a really neat point of view, where is that like every kind of trials or hardship that you go through, you ask God this question, which is, what do you want to be for me now that you couldn't have been for me before? Like, why do I have to be in this specific scenario so that you can show me something that you could not show me before? And so the second question, right? I think I do have a habit of always asking whenever I need something, but I have asked this specific question in the rhythmic pattern that a lot of times whenever there's something, whether I am lost, I don't understand, or whether I am in hardship, I'm always popping this question because I always feel like God wants to reveal something.
Yeah. Well, for me, prayer is regular, so day and night before meals, like whenever I feel like it, because again, like habits build up relationship, habits build up feelings as well. But and also like what Pastor had said, I commit this first hour or
The
this
first hour
first
day.
10%
Yeah, yeah.
and trust that God will take care of the rest
Yeah.
of the 90%.
Yeah.
But the role of prayer, I feel like is a bit like the weather these days. The temperature these days is high and low, high and low. So sometimes is I feel like prayer is just a comforting action. So you do it, okay, I feel a little bit better by myself.
Yeah.
But then sometimes there's a really strong faith there that I trust in God on what I prayed about. And I was discussing with friends like just this past Monday, and maybe we can talk about it.
Yeah.
Is we were somehow discussing the Causeway Bay under the Gooseneck Bridge. The
Oh,
people
the 打個小人
yeah, I don't know what's that in English.
beat the small person.
Yeah, beat the small person. Yeah, and then I just have this thought, like honestly, would you feel better if you went to beat the small person, or you prayed that God help me forgive this person?
Oh. You know, if you think about it, like if you went to like, you know those like places where, what's it called? Like you basically go to a room and you just destroy things,
Yeah.
right? Does that actually make you feel better or feel more rageful? I mean, I've never tried it, right? So it's like, I mean, I would never go under the bridge and hit my enemies.
Yeah, but something
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that rage
Yeah.
room, something like that
Yeah, I
rage room,
know.
or you could actually do the revenge on that person.
Because like, okay, maybe as an older sibling, I'm a justice kind of person, so like I enjoy, not enjoy, that's such a terrible word, like when the bad guy gets what they deserve,
yeah.
I feel so good. Like I was like,
Yes.
finally. And I remember I was watching this TV show, I don't remember what it was, but I was like, please don't let the bad guy go away, please let them just suffer. Yes, you know. And will I pray and bless them? I don't know, but I think it's definitely difficult to pray and bless someone who has hurt you, and I think it takes a lot of, I guess, definitely the Lord to give you grace to do that. I mean, this is going back to the previous point about like, you know, forgiveness, right? Is I think when you're in constant communion with the Lord, when you're in constant prayer with the Lord, there is no desire to like, or, you know, like, you know, pray for curses against your enemy. I think genuinely you're just like, you know, you and the Lord are the same page, you know, you're in tandem with Him. So as you're praying, you're really just praying like how I can basically praying, you know, for the good of them. And because I think our prayers are meant to communicate with God. Yes, I can voice my frustrations like, hey, Lord, this person has hurt me and I really want to da this yuyan, but then, you know what's good, and so I commit this person to you and bless them, you know. And yeah, I think when you're more in like, you know, in prayer, in communication with Him, I think you're more inclined to pray differently.
I am struggling to like figure out. I have a feeling, but I gist of it, but I can't. I'm trying to figure out how to say it. I think it's like sometimes it's just that like some people need to feel like they need to do something, whether it reaps results or not. But they feel like they need to do something to give them the satisfaction of it, right? Like I think when they do this slipper slapping thing, that, you know, it feels like the responsibility they have, they're like, oh, I'm gonna pass this responsibility to like the evil spirits, so now it's out of my hands, you know, that kind of thing. They just need to do something to bring them ease, I think.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think that's actually a really interesting comparison about like releasing forgiveness or this slipper slapping thing.
Slip slap.
it just rolled out the tongue, right? And I feel that like forgiveness is just, it's almost the same thing, right? It's like the slipper slapping is that you're giving it to the evil spirits to do it, and forgiveness is that like it feels harder for you to do, but it's almost the same thing, that you're kind of like handing off your burdens to God, and He will deal with it, right? And He will enact the
revenge,
punishment, consequence, if necessary, right? So I feel it's very similar things, but I guess depends on which kingdom
rules
you
in your
want.
life.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, we talked about the whole, like, the different types of suffering. There's the unrighteous suffering, basically, like, you know, you suffer because of other people's pain, you know, sin. There's righteous suffering because of Jesus, and then there's, like, deserved suffering, which is, sorry, it was undeserved suffering, deserved suffering, and righteous suffering. Yes, that's correct. Right. And so I feel that sometimes, like, the pain that you receive, the suffering that you go through because of other people's mistakes, like, I mean, sometimes there's really no justification, right? And you can, like, even if I were to take matters in my hands, like, what can I do? Maybe I can do something, make a change, but it's like, again, trusting the sovereignty of God. Like, Lord, not my will, but your will be done. And if the guy walks free, I mean, Lord, you know what's up. And this is where prayer comes in, then you can voice your relationship, your frustrations, like Job, right? I mean, he wasn't like, oh Lord, all is well, like I lost everything. That's all good, no problem. Job was like, straight up, Lord Jesus, this sucks. Well, not in those words, but the Hebrew version of those words of this sucks. Yeah, so I think, like, definitely I would say, yeah, prayer, I dial it up a little bit more in terms of crisis, but I try to make it more like definitely it's a regular rhythm, like every day I journal my prayers to just to, you know, get it going. But yeah, it's a rhythm in my life. And I know during this time we talked about, like, finding strength in prayer and community, like in terms of, like, suffering and supplication. Community is so important. That's one thing that we talk about, is like find a group, like a group that can back you and make sure that, you know, they have your basically have your back you, have your back, whatever, and to pray for you, and maybe, like, call you out on things if, you know, maybe the reason why you're suffering is because of your dumb actions. I would trust that my friends would tell me, Pet, you dumb. Okay. All right, and finally, let's talk about suffering and sureness, which is basically the hope of resurrection. So yeah, maybe let's talk a little bit about, you know, when we question God, and explained how it shaped your relationship with Christ.
I think for me is the one time, I think the most important time I questioned God, actually, is this really questioning, was when I started pursuing him myself. Like, and this is why I'm such a huge advocate for this topic, that, you know, for the longest time growing up, my Christian faith was my parents' faith. You know, it was never my own. And so I think there was, and because it was my parents' faith, you know, it just didn't have that much value to me, you know. And, you know, like, so if someone argues with me, I cannot really fully, like, stand my ground and protect it, because I don't know it thoroughly, right? And so I think that was a few times where when I strayed away so far from God, that eventually I was like, you know what, there's definitely some good here, I need to find it myself. And then because I made it my own faith, now it's personal, now I can, like, stand up and defend it. I use this metaphor to with a few other friends, that, like, whenever they feel like they want to question God, if it's with good intent, I actually encourage it, because I use a metaphor of, like, you know, the foundation of a house, you know. If you have doubt within, it's like there's like a pocket of air in your foundation, and so when there's too much pressure on top, the foundation will crack. And so when they have good intents to question God, I encourage it, because that's them filling up those pockets so it won't cave in. Yeah.
Well, I feel like I always question God, but not in a hateful, negative sense, but just like reflecting faith all the time. And I believe it's a good thing, because sometimes you know how you have it's not exactly a crush on someone with, like, compared to God, but then sometimes when you have a crush on someone, you feel like you're in love with your imagined version of that person. And so I just feel like if you don't question your faith or question God, you are believing in your own imagined version of God. But then I question him in two areas recently. I think, like, one is on his way of communication, and then the second way is my own problems, like skin and lack of money. So and on the communication side, it's like when we judge communication, it is only successful when the receiver understands it, right? So if I say something, maybe it's too complicated or too much technical jargon, and you don't understand, then I'm not communicating successfully. But then when we communicate with God, or God communicates with us, it can the reality can be He said something or He communicated with us, but then we haven't received it or we don't understand
Because we're not like tuned in or something.
Yeah, and then there's no way we can blame God. Oh God, why are you not talking? Why are you not communicating? But then God say, I'm working.
Yeah.
I've told you. And then or you can say, because He's God, of course you don't understand. But then then this kind of communication is a bit confusing. Yeah.
I mean, prayer is always meant to be two-way, and I think sometimes it can be hard for people to like hear God, because I mean that's obviously an age-old question. Like, how do I hear God? Is it audible? Is it not? And so it's I mean it's a matter of, I think, finding for yourself, like, how does God really speak to you? And again, we've talked about this, like how God speaks to one is different to how God speaks to another. Like how I would hear is very different from how you guys might hear. Maybe same method, but just different ways. And I mean, I've definitely questioned God. Like, you know, again, growing up is like, yeah, it's my parents' faith. It's something that they want me to have, but they always left it for me to decide if I wanted to be Christian or not. And but as a good girl, you know, I feel like I must be Christian. You know, this is something that's pleasing to my parents, blah, blah, blah. So I only do it because I was told. So, and I think when I question God, like, what's the point of doing this? If I'm just, you know, telling my parents, like, yes, I'm going to church, and so that they are at ease, then that just made me realize, like, you know, that's something that I need to figure out for myself. Like when I say that, what's the point of being a Christian? I don't want to be one if it's all about just ticking a box. And I think that's when I realized how much I needed community at that point. So I think community has played a big part in my life in forming my faith and strengthening my faith. And I think YWAM was where it really showed me how it looks like to really live in community with like-minded individuals in faith. Yes, there's like-minded individuals in terms of like what you like to do and everything, but it's definitely different for sure when it's doing it with people who also like are springing out in your faith.
And I've read that even though if your experience isn't so positive, say you, health issue hasn't resolved, or money issue still hasn't resolved, like I've read some encouragement that I find really strong, is that perhaps God hasn't healed you, so you finally learned patience. And then God hasn't given you riches, so you finally learned humility and 100% trust in trust in Him alone. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I think it's actually very good when you have questions and not just let people like tell you who God is. I think you understand for yourself who God is. I think really helps and goes a long way. So finally, I'm going to land with this verse from Philippians chapter 3, verses 13 to 14. Brothers, I do not consider that I've made it my own, but one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind and straining forward to what lies ahead, I press on toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus. So basically, with a perspective on the future, the present becomes bearable. What are some ways we can maintain our focus on eternity?
Trusting Jesus will return. There will be a new heaven and earth. And then like just believing and remind yourself again and again that sin and death are already defeated. Satan is already defeated and will be cast to the like layer of fire. And so all these earthly things like money, physical body, pain, suffering will eventually fade away.
Yeah, for me, similar. I think simple answer is follow God's will. But I think, but more personally, I think like it's through the struggles, the regrets, the suffering, it grows us. Like I say, it grows us to who we are, right? And I'm reminded about that Bible verse that like, "Blessed are the persecuted, for they shall inherit the kingdom of God." Right? That through this persecution, that God is he is our witness. All of this is not just being ignored, and this is just us suffering alone. God is seeing it, and then I'm also reminded about this the Rocky quote. It's like, oh, it doesn't matter how hard you hit.
It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward.
Yeah, basically, one day it'll all pay off.
One day it will all pay off. I think it's also knowing that eternity is written in our hearts, and that we were, in a way, made to last forever, live forever. Because I mean, that was the idea that God created, is like relationship with Him, right? And I think something that will help me maintain my focus on eternity is really just to know that, yes, the hope of resurrection in Christ and new heavens, new earth, but really is like I'm not in this alone. That that Jesus is interceding for me, that He's with me in everything, and I'm powered by the Holy Spirit, to live my days. And yes, I may not understand. And if I look to everywhere around me, I might be distracted. I might be, stray off the path that He set before me. But it's like, yes, let me just look to the Lord. Let me walk towards Him slowly but surely. I don't think God has ever asked us to run towards Him, like in terms of like, just hurry up. I think it's just like He's very patient. He's guiding us step by step. We go. So that's my head. It's like, you know what? I don't understand. I'm just going to take it one step at a time. If there are moments I need to run, then okay. If I moments I need to slow down, okay. But I think it's never looking back. That's what I think. All right. Well, yep. That's that for today. We have one more week in this series. That will be Easter Sunday, talking about how Jesus is risen. But until then, we will catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.